Test. It's on. Testing, testing, testing. Testing. There we go. That's better. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted us to start about 5 minutes ago, and I can't blame you. I got involved in a great conversation, and it looks like you all are doing the same. So I apologize about the delay, but not only are we good content, but hopefully you make some good contacts as well. So without further ado, to help us get going, because I know everybody's got a busy schedule, our next session, a lot of what we've talked about today is, we need to pay for this. How are we going to pay for that? And a lot of questions about what the federal dollars are going to do. The next panel is going to be able to provide all the answers, 100% of the answers. So no pressure whatsoever. No, we have fantastic. We had the Division of Energy talk a number of times, and so we thought we'd bring some other folks in today. And I'm really excited to bring to you both folks from the EPA Coalition for the Green Capital and the Missouri Green Bank, who's partnering with Coalition for Green Capital to talk to you about mostly the greenhouse gas reduction funds with the tangential other funding components in there. But kicking us off is Andrew Wynne and Jenny Kissel from EPA, and I'll let you go ahead and go. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. I'm going to crank this up. All right, there we go. Good afternoon, everybody. So Andrew, one of the previous speakers, was saying that he was going to bore you all as an engineer. Well, we're going to do our best to raise the bar on that level of boredom here, because you get to hear from the federal government for the next 20 minutes. So my name is Andrew Wynne. I'm our EPA Region 7's climate change senior advisor. And I'm here with Jenny Kissel, who's our Inflation Reduction Act senior advisor. EPA Region 7 covers the 4 states of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, as well as the 9 tribal nations within those borders. And so we're here to talk to you quite a bit about the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And for once, this is a really exciting opportunity for us to be here with you all. Because we have we're talking about dollars. We're talking about money available to all of you to realize your goals, priorities, and opportunities for clean energy investments, advancing environmental justice considerations, and a slew of other environmental programs and opportunities. So I'm going to break this down. I'm going to focus on the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to handle the Inflation Reduction Act. And then we'll sort of wrap things up and share some other resources at the end here as well. The biggest takeaway, I'll get into specifics here about the BIL in a second. And you can hit, I think, 2 more times. The school bus gets to drive across the screen there. So in summary, between the BIL and the IRA, over the next 10 years, there's about $100 billion with a B dollars coming to EPA. That's just EPA. That's not across the federal government. It's a much larger pot of money. But just EPA is $100 billion over the next decade. That's a sizable investment. To put that into context a little bit more, our annual operating budget usually hovers congressionally approved around $10 billion. So this effectively doubles our budget over the next decade, which is transformative. So the bipartisan infrastructure law represents $60 billion of that $100 billion over the next 5 years to EPA, and it focuses on predominantly four areas that I'll get into a little bit more detail on here. So these 4 areas predominantly represent existing statutory programmatic areas for EPA. So water infrastructure, you can see there almost over 80% of the 60 billion is going to water infrastructure improvements. It's right there in the name of the act and the name of the law, the bipartisan infrastructure law. So this is really supporting, again, our state revolving loan fund programs, the SRFs, also lead contaminants, emerging contaminants as well, such as PFAS. And so significant dollars flowing to our state, tribal, and local partners for water infrastructure upgrades and improvements. I'll move down to the bottom left there. About just over $5 billion going to our Superfund, brownfields, and Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, programs, and that includes recycling programs. So of that $5 billion, we have about 3.5, I think it is, going towards new funding for Superfund National Priorities List, or NPL sites. About a 1.5 billion is going to support our brownfields program, which, if many of you are familiar with brownfields, those are properties that may or may not be contaminated, so they need to be assessed to look at potential contamination on that property before they can be properly cleaned up and then redeveloped to get back on local tax bases. The third piece there is smaller pots of money. They're in the billions of dollars, millions of dollars, not the billions of dollars, but still sizable investments going to 2 new recycling programs, grant opportunities, both of which have closed for this particular fiscal year, but will probably be open in future fiscal years here. So those are 2 new programs coming online. Another $5 billion up into the top right there. The bus driving across the screen there. So that's our Clean School Bus program. This is a new program that was started under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It does have some tangential relationship with the Diesel Emission Reductions Act, or DERA. But this program is specifically designed to replace school buses with zero or low emission school buses, such as electric school buses. This is done via 2 different types of programs. So there's a rebate program element of the Clean School Bus program, as well as a grant program. The grant program actually just closed last week for this fiscal year. Again, should be open in future fiscal years. And then the rebate program, we're expecting that program to come online later this fall. So we'll have more links. If you just Google EPA Clean School Bus, you'll come across the website for more information. The really nice thing about this program, and a lot of the different opportunities that you're going to hear about here in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, is the leveraging opportunity that exists with other programs across the federal government. So Clean School Bus, for example, there's significant other opportunities for clean school funding through the Department of Transportation, through the Department of Energy. So all of these programs are really seeking to complement one another, to work together to help, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, provide cleaner, safer environments for our kids. And so some really cool opportunities that I'd encourage you to check out. The last small pot, I say small, 100 million, just 100 million, is going to our pollution prevention program. And that program is specifically focused on source reduction at businesses. So looking at ways to optimize energy efficiency, water efficiency, reduction of hazardous waste at their source. And so we have an existing pollution prevention program at EPA. It's statutorily tied to the Pollution Prevention Act, or the P2 Act. And this 100 million seeks to complement and expand upon that program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny here to get a little bit more into the Inflation Reduction Act. We can go to the next slide too. Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. This is not a retirement account presentation, although sometimes Googling this can be a little tricky. All right, so what I wanted to really kind of show here is the amount of funding going to other agencies, the amount of funding that is going to EPA to distribute. So the main pot of funding for the Inflation Reduction Act is with tax credits, and this gives support to the electricity sector, manufacturing, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and low carbon fuel. EPA and other federal agencies are receiving a significant amount of money, but I wanted to point out that it can be really hard to figure out through all these agencies who's doing what and what programs are happening. So I did want to recommend, if you look at, there is a EPA climate funding fair, and they have a resource guide that compiled a lot of these federal opportunities between multiple agencies like DOE, Department of Transportation, USDA, and other agencies, and kind of compiled a lot of their trackers for this funding. So that might be a good resource to keep track of as you're looking for opportunities. So the IRA is making historic investments in greenhouse gas reduction. I think it's an estimated about 40% by 2030 is one of the model predictions for how much this funding could help with greenhouse gas reductions. And with EPA's budget, we have appropriated spending to support 24 new and existing programs. And we're going to be talking about 6 of these main ones here. So the largest one is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, but we also have funding for climate pollution reduction grants, environmental and climate justice block grants, grants to reduce air pollution at ports, methane emissions reductions program, and the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle program. Next slide, please. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, as I said, is kind of the largest pool. So this one is actually being separated into 3 opportunities. So if you go to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction website, they will have different, more adept on these competitions, and these competitions are currently underway. 2 of the competitions are the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. So these are looking at more things like funding a few kind of hub nonprofits to get to help as grantees to help people gain access to capital, especially in low income and disadvantaged communities. So these are kind of different than a typical grant program where EPA is administering each individual grant, but more kind of looking at things like green banks, which we'll be talking about more coming up. The third program is the Solar for All program. So that is a program, I think they were looking at on the website, it said an estimated of 60 grants looking across the country at building up low income and residential solar. The climate pollution reduction grants are the next block of funding. So the first kind of portion of this is a planning phase, and this is currently underway. So states, local agencies, and tribes and territories across the United States came in for planning grant funding. So this is coming up with a climate action plan, looking at creating a greenhouse gas inventory, what kind of program priorities does each state and local area who came in for this want to do. So that will be the first phase of the climate pollution reduction grants. The second phase are implementation grants. So there should be more information coming about that soon as well. There are also climate and justice block grants available with funding for community-based nonprofit organizations. And there's more information coming out soon about the Clean Ports program with grants and rebates to install low and zero emission technology at ports and develop climate action plans for ports, the methane emissions reduction program, and the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle program. So a lot of these programs are still in development. They're still kind of baking. There's through the funding, EPA funding resource guide, there's access to tables and things that will update when these programs are coming out. There's also ways to sign up for updates on those program websites when they become available as well. Next slide, please. You can keep going, yeah. So the kind of goal of the IRA and how it's been approached is to look at funding change through many different ways. So there's the top-down approach. So the climate pollution reduction grants really looking at planning, trying to kind of high level, what are the best approaches, what are our priorities? But there's also bottom-up approaches as well, like finding environmental justice, getting a lot of community input, and funding EJ grants. but there are also sector-based sources. So there are mobile sources that we're looking at, and then also stationary sources. So we're looking at kind of a whole picture of greenhouse gas reductions through these programs. And next slide, and I'll turn it back over to Andrew.
Yeah, so this slide is really meant to capture and summarize the really large buckets of funding and opportunities that are available under both of these laws. And so the programs that are listed here, I'm not going to go through them all. I believe Josh these slides will be available to everybody afterwards. So feel free to peruse these. But this digs into, Jenny and I both referenced that, the leveraging opportunity that exists here across the federal landscape. So ways that DOE, DOT, USDA, HUD, other federal agencies can complement a lot of the programs that EPA now has at its disposal, in addition to other funding at the state and local levels as well. So, these are some pretty large buckets here: environmental justice, the power sector, perhaps most relevant for you all in the room today, but transportation, industry, buildings, land and agriculture, some pretty large buckets, but it's pretty awesome to see the scale and the ability for us to scale up a lot of these efforts nationwide. We can go to I think we just have one more slide, and that's just a super busy slide of contact information. So Jenny mentioned that a lot of these programs are still in development, but we do have websites for all of these programs set up. We also have inboxes for all of these programs set up. So would encourage you, if one of these in particular jumped out at you, say, I really want to stay on top of, the clean school bus program, or the heavy duty vehicles program. We have specific email inboxes now set up for each of those programs. We also just at the last bottom right there is just a general Inflation Reduction Act inbox available. Jenny also mentioned a few of the different websites where you can, see some of that summarized, packaged information of resources. We totally recognize, we've heard this time and time again, that, frankly, there's so many opportunities out there right now, and it's really tough at the state, at the local levels to figure out, what's most applicable for you to apply for. What makes sense for my organization, my industry, my community. So we're really trying to do a better job of packaging these resources in a way that makes more sense for you all, that allows you to grasp and maybe better comprehend what's best to come in for. But perhaps the most important thing I can put on the slide is, to that point, is just our contact information. Please use us as resources here in the region. We can also help try and connect the dots. If there's things that we can't answer, we can, elevate things up the chain to folks in our headquarters office, et cetera. So please, use us as resources locally. And again, we're really happy to be here today, and we'll pass it over to Nina. Thanks, everybody.
First, I'd like to say thank you for the invitation to speak this afternoon. My name is Nina Young, and I'm the Director of Policy and Network at Coalition for Green Capital. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and have spent the past couple of days between Kansas and Missouri and had such a lovely time here. So I'm really excited to this being the first opportunity to come, but definitely not the last, because there's a lot of work to do. So I think Andrew and Jenny just explained, what's happening at the federal level. So I'm going to step it down now to the national level to give you an idea of one of the coalitions that are applying explicitly to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Next slide, please. And so, as they mentioned, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a $27 billion competition. Coalition for Green Capital has been around for over a decade, and we were initially created to set up the National Green Bank. The National Green Bank Act was actually included in the Waxman and Markey Act, and as you all know, that was not successful. So the founder of the Coalition for Green Capital determined to make a shift away from doing clean energy investment at the national level and focus on establishing what we call green banks at the state and local level. So green banks are essentially nonprofit loan funds, and these nonprofit loan funds are explicitly created to do clean energy and energy efficiency investments. And for the past 10 years have had great success in some of our major metro areas, but we really see that there's a need to have a truly national approach and the ability to get financing from the federal government down to the local level. And so the way that our application for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, we're doing business as the American Green Bank Consortium. So we currently manage this consortium. It's over 40 nonprofit loan funds that include state and local green banks, public agencies, and community lenders, which include community development financial institutions and credit unions. And so all of these partners come together. Before the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, we had monthly calls where we were sharing best practices and trying to figure out, who's having the most successful programs. Some of the entities are PACE administrators, and we're having really great success there and sharing their lessons with other partners. Some of our kind of most well-known successes are the New York Green Bank and the Connecticut Green Bank, where they really created these type of infrastructure like banks at the city level. Because as you all know, we don't really have at the federal level a infrastructure bank that can help close some of the gaps within the market. And so that's what green banks have really done, is what we call crowd in resources, or as we've mentioned many times today, leverage resources. So how can public money drive in private capital to help with market transformation and clean energy investments? But what has also been discussed this afternoon is the Biden administration's focus on Justice 40. So a lot of the work is now squarely focused on serving low-income and disadvantaged communities. So while we've seen success at a lot of the major metro markets, now all of the markets are becoming a focus, particularly rural communities, as often they are left behind when looking at these types of resources. And so CGC was explicitly chartered to address reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, redress climate change, and energy-related environmental injustice. Next slide, please. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, again, it's a competition. It's 3 different pots. And so in Missouri, the EIRA will be applying to the Solar for All program. And the Solar for All program is $7 billion, which was mentioned previously, with 60 awards. And we're assuming that's roughly 1 award per state plus territories and tribal communities. And we are applying, and I could talk about this a bit in more detail in another slide. Coalition for Green Capital is applying as a lead applicant to the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. And I'll go into detail about those competitions. And then we're assisting some applications of Solar for All for areas where there's gaps in the market. And so forming a national green bank is we're building what we're calling our big green tent. So right now the tent doors are open. We need as many national partners as possible to show the Environmental Protection Agency that there is significant demand. I mean, that has not been an understatement in this conversation at all today. There's such a great need, and there's a lot of federal resources, but honestly, EPA also has to be able to show through pipelines and other ways of gathering information to show to Congress that there's such a great need that all of these public dollars will be used and they will support and prioritize low-income and disadvantaged communities. So we are asking eligible entities to participate and join in our coalition. As I mentioned, there's multiple coalitions pursuing these funds, and we're not expecting exclusivity. We're all going to need to work with one another in order to see success. As the bullet says, the country needs an unprecedented collaboration and national pipeline development. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is the largest pot within the Inflation Reduction Act that EPA is administering. It's also the largest non-tax credit driven opportunity. So it's a combination of grant funds and low cost capital that's going to be divided between debt products and equity products and other types of revolving loan fund programs. And we're deep in the process of working with our national partners to figure out how to best design a program that can serve all markets. And so in our application, we want to maximize pipelines. So EPA is asking that we illustrate an investment strategy that addresses all 10 of the EPA regions. And so we have many partners here in Missouri, rapidly growing our partnerships in Kansas, and just in general across the EPA Region 7, really trying to make sure that once these funds are distributed by the federal government, we have aggressive timelines that EPA is asking us to deploy this capital. For Solar for All, the funds need to be deployed in 5 years, and for the National Clean Investment Fund in 7 years. So it's really going to take a comprehensive approach where we have as many partners on the ground in order to deploy these funds. And so we want to see reduction. Earlier, someone provided the definition for energy burdens and health impacts and greenhouse gas emissions. There is a goal from EPA that 40% of the funds go to low-income and disadvantaged communities. We see that as a baseline. We want to get as much funding as possible in order to address the co-benefits that come with clean energy and energy efficiency investments. Engagement. That is why I'm here today, is to do as much engagement as possible. We are a national entity, but we want local impact. So it's really going to require myself, my team, and others to get out and do the advocacy and do the marketing. That was also discussed several times earlier today. We understand that the communities that we're serving do not know these resources are available. So a lot of work that's going to be embedded in these initiatives is boots on the ground effort. And self-sufficiency. This is interesting, and I don't know if this was discussed earlier. EPA is expecting for any entity that receives funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to be financially self-sustaining. So we're going to have to figure out how to strike that balance of providing resources to low-income and disadvantaged communities while being able to have a functioning nonprofit lending entity that can function into perpetuity, or as we often say, function ourselves out of business because we've crowded in enough private capital where the consumers that we serve are no longer seen as risky investments, and the private sector feels comfortable enough for providing resources for everyone within the market. And then progress. Many states in EPA Region 7 have climate targets and goals. In order to reach any climate goal, we need funding to figure out how to execute those investments. So we see the establishment of a national green bank as a core tenet in order to achieve any climate goals, particularly national and federal goals. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, Coalition for Green Capital is serving as a lead applicant for the National Clean Investment Fund. That competition is $14 billion, and there will be 2 to 3 awards, and that is how we intend to capitalize the National Green Bank. The Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, we will also be pursuing a lead application. That competition is $6 billion, and there will be 2 to 7 awards. And so that will be creating a hub entity that will then be providing financing of up to $10 million for community lenders. So if anyone here in the audience is a community lender, which might, of the EPA eligibility, is a nonprofit lending entity, which can often be a community development financial institution, or even an economic development agency that has a revolving loan fund. So there's a series of eligibility requirements in which you can apply to get funds through the through CGC after getting the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator funding. There's a lot of acronyms, and forgive me if I'm talking very quickly through them. Okay, and then the Solar for All, as I mentioned, that's $7 billion with 60 awards, and we're supporting a handful of those applications. Next slide, please. So these are multiple grant opportunities, but we ultimately have one goal, is to ensure an equitable green future. I think it's incredibly exciting that the federal government has provided an opportunity to rapidly deploy financing to scale up the transition to a clean future. And I think it's imperative that we prioritize low-income and disadvantaged communities, because the communities that have the ability to make the investments are already doing so, but we have to ensure that communities are not left behind. I was having a conversation earlier today with somebody about my newly found love for economics and industrial policy. And if you think about the clean energy transition as an industrial policy, I believe that this is the first industrial policy where an equitable lens or framework is being prioritized. Because as many of you all know, there have been industrial policies in the US several times that have either made people worse off than they were before, or, really had an inequitable imbalance. And so if we prioritize equity and justice in our investments, there will be and there can be community and economic development benefits that come out of these investments. So I'm very excited, despite the fact that we were given 90 days to complete these applications. It's been a chaotic time, but an incredibly exciting time. And next slide, please. And so we're doing active solicitation, despite having only a handful of days left to pull together this application. We're looking to build a network with a proven track record to equitably drive clean energy adoption in all 3 priority product markets. I did not say this before. So the focus of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is to invest in distributed energy resources, vehicle electrification and transportation, and mobilizing financing and private capital in all low-income and disadvantaged communities. So I gave the quick pitch, but if you all are interested, even the people online who are watching, if you're interested in learning more about our proposal, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm really excited to have a partner of ours at the Coalition for Green Capital tell you a bit about a pilot project, so you can actually see what types of projects will potentially be coming out of these resources locally here in Columbia. So I'm gonna hand it over to my colleague, Dave. Thank you.
Yes. Very great. I'm Dave Seidel. I'm representing the Missouri Green Bank, as she was talking about the different green banks throughout the United States. This is that I'm talking about here is a pilot project that we're trying to launch. I believe is what will be soon. I think, yeah. And what it does is we have, I think it's 6 cities throughout the United States that are going to be participating in this pilot project. And the purpose of the pilot project is it's building decarbonization in a box. And basically it's a package kind of deal that we're trying to basically through utility engagement and utility information gathering, the analysis of the different types of municipal buildings that we're going to look at. And what we're looking at in this pilot project is not the buildings that are 50K and larger. We're looking at the smaller sector, the small and medium buildings that are 10,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet, because they've been kind of the missing middle. And we're also going to have in this pilot project, it's going to have free technical assistance for the buildings and the participants, property owners, and of course the green banks and the coalition will be funding the capital for that with the lenders and focusing on local lenders as well. the local lenders are a big part of keeping this project going. Next slide, yeah. So the challenge we have in this is to reach this missing middle, and reach these different types of building owners and tell them about the programs and tell them about the capital investment that is available to them, the grants and the different opportunities they have. Because in the past, one of the big things that we're focusing on this is more of the, a lot of the LED lighting and all those types of things have been taken up. But we're looking at like the HVAC, like we heard earlier about the rooftop units and different things that are aging. And that's one of the things that really will play a big role. There's a lot of technology that's out there now that has more high tech and high efficiency air conditioning systems and heat pumps and different things like that, because a lot of these older buildings, the owners will say, well, it's not failing, so I'll just fix it. And then I won't replace it until it's too late. And then they just replace it with something that is just like what it was there. So they don't realize that there's new, better, high efficiency technology that can be implemented that will reduce the greenhouse gas effect, as well as give them great energy efficiency on their buildings. So the buildings that we're looking at are the small businesses, the small and medium sized multifamily buildings, charter schools, health centers, churches, grocery stores, restaurants, family farms, and those type of buildings. Let's see. Next slide. And one of the participants in the 6 cities is the city of Columbia in Boone County. So this is kind of what we're looking at, is trying to come up with the different, there's over 700 buildings between the 10,000 and 50,000 square feet that are in our pool of what we're trying to reach. And 5 to 7% of those buildings need to replace their aging HVAC annually. And so we're targeting just the ones that will benefit from this market initiative. We can just get 8 of those per year, then we're going to start building to see how successful this pilot program will be. And so we need to collect all the data from the buildings, access the finances, and get an awareness program to the local contractors, and the free energy assistance portion of the program are the barriers and the elements that we're looking at. Just some of the things that we looked at is this not only includes the HVAC, but it would also include like lighting, if there's still some lighting availability, and also solar and some of the other. We want to really make this program make it into a pipeline of, sustainable, energy efficiency improvement projects for those small size buildings. And each of the 6 cities that are being selected have similar profiles that we're trying to put together across the country to build this pilot project. Let's see, next slide. Let's see, that's a little bit more about the technical assistance and education. We're looking at putting those resources together, and then evaluating the buildings and getting them so that they qualify for the investments and what their return on investment is. And then the community lenders and educators, we have to basically educate a lot of people. It's going to take a big effort to roll out this project, because there's a lot of pieces to it and a lot of local involvement in the projects. And some of the things that we have to look at is where we're getting the data from, is the data good, verifying the data, and then profiling those buildings, working with the utility companies to see if we can get some building profiles on those particular buildings, and then seeing what the lending institutions can provide locally. Next slide. And these are our key implementation partners. A lot of these different entities here provide software and analysis of buildings and the profiling of the buildings and the technical assistance platforms. And they're currently being worked with the coalition over the entire United States with different projects like what she was talking about with the New York group there. And anyway, these are the partners, and then this slide shows their success on the bottom there, a little bit of what they've each accomplished. And they're going to be working with the coalition on providing some of the key software and development issues on that. And that's pretty much my presentation on that. Okay.
Thank you all very much. All right, do we have any questions? EPA Coalition for Green Capital, Missouri Green Bank. Yes.
Thank you. So I guess my question is, how do these resources actually get down? Because we heard a lot of conversation about the Justice 40 and working with the small community groups and all of that. So how will the Green Bank funds benefit those communities, and how will those resources get down to the community level? Because I really, from the presentations, it sounded really good, but I don't really know how it gets to those small community groups that are right now trying to figure out how they get the resources into their particular community.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the case of the way that the funds will flow and are currently flowing is through, so the Green Bank entities are nonprofit loan funds. And so there are several entities here in Missouri that are acting and functioning like a green bank, but not necessarily using the terminology green bank in their name. So and I always say this wrong, and that's why I had to write it down. So the Environmental Improvement and Energy Resources Authority. Thank you. Somebody give me thumbs up. Great. So that is an entity at the state level that is functioning like a green bank. And so the funds are flowing through nonprofit entities that are currently existing or will exist. And the way that the way that EPA has structured it is that new community lending institutions can be created in order to ensure that there's more location-specific funding. So if there's a nonprofit if you don't mind me asking, what area are you based in? So if there is a nonprofit entity that's currently doing lending, it even can be an entity that's doing small business lending but wants to expand into clean energy lending, this window of opportunity gives them the resources in order to expand into that market. And so that's how the funds will flow to the community level. You're right. So we are working. That is why I'm here. I'm the outreach program for my organization. So I can email you and share with you because we're having an active open solicitation at this moment. So we're still taking new partners. And you do not currently have to do clean energy lending in order to participate in our application.
Okay. Wait 1 second, sorry.
I'm sending an email introduction to you and the two CDFIs in St. Louis right now.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So the second part of my question is, are the loans actually for the building owners or homeowners? Who signs off on the loan?
So it depends on whatever the loan product that's developed. So every green bank or every loan fund just in general creates loan products based off of the market need. And so you can create, so one of the best opportunities with Solar for All is the emphasis on community solar.
Yes.
And so community solar will benefit renters. Also in Solar for All, energy efficiency improvements are eligible uses, but it has to be connected to the development of solar. So there's opportunities there. And in Solar for All is also a significant amount of grant funds. Now through the National Clean Investment Fund, that's going to be low cost loan capital or equity like products. And that can be for both building property owners, like single family owners can get commercial loans through some of the smaller green banks, or if you're doing large scale, like if you're a multifamily developer and you have a pipeline, then you can do direct investment through the national entity.
Thank you.
There's a question behind you, Josh.
Nice young lady. I don't know if this question is for you. This may be for the state. Yeah. How do we get community solar when at the present time, I live on the eastern side of the state and it's Ameren. So how does community do community solar if there's no policies or current mechanisms in place for us to do it outside of their program, right? Where I live and work at, I love Ameren for this. We're getting a solar canopy and they say that it can power 30 homes, but it's just going into the grid. We're in a Justice 40 track. We're in an enterprise track. We're in that nice policy Trump made, opportunity zone. Like we're in everything, but there's nothing for us. You say community, and we live in a state where we can't do anything to protect us. So, like I said, I don't know if that's for you to answer, the state, Ameren, but in order for us to use what you're offering, there has to be some type of policy change, mechanism change, or we're going to just keep standing some change. Slaves to energy burdens.
I do think that when we talked about community solar is a state policy. So our speakers here today are more talking about what funding will come down from the state. And unfortunately, we don't know where that money's going, and we don't know the programs that would be funded by them yet. So a lot of the questions we don't know. All we do know right now is that A, there is money with a B coming this way. B, not to be redundant, it is targeting energy efficiency projects, climate action projects, solar projects. So if there is a program that or a sector that needs to be addressed, try and reach out. I know our next group is going to talk about what they're doing locally in Kansas City and St. Louis on the commercial side. I know that our organization is looking at targeting funds to do smaller commercial and rural components. And there are people nationwide looking at a loan loss reserve fund that will make risky investments less risky for the lending partners, which means they're more likely to do it. Also a loan or interest rate buy down component to where it will make it more attractive for certain communities. And to highlight this money at a minimum of the 40% is going to those tracks that you mentioned in some fashion or form. How it gets there, we don't know. When it gets there, we know in the next 5 to 7 years, but it's going in that way at a minimum for all of these folks, no matter if it's coalition or someone else.
I would also like to add, because I know there's a lot of utility entities in the room, that there's opportunities for collaboration as well. So as you're creating your incentive programs, and this term has been used a lot today, braiding, how do we braid these resources together? I think, to plant a seed early is to think about your incentive programs. And then if there's gaps within your programs, how can these nonprofit loan funds come and fill those gaps with these federal resources? So it's a very early on comment, and I'd be willing to brainstorm if there's any utilities here that want to talk about it, because I think that's the huge win that comes out of it. And EPA, there's EPA folks here, but we need to talk to utilities early and often. So I'm excited to figure out how we can all work together.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
Just one other comment. And this is a sort of analogy that I've been using to try and couch some of this. And full disclosure, the information that Jenny and I provided today from the EPA side, all of these different programs may look a little bit different. The climate pollution reduction grants have different eligible applicants than the greenhouse gas reduction fund, than the environmental and climate justice block grant program. They're all going to look a little bit differently. So it's challenging for us to be able to say, all of these are going to, you're all going to be eligible for all of them. That's not an accurate statement. But what I would say, and what I'd encourage, you all to consider, again, this analogy that I've been using is sort of when I was applying for colleges, years ago, you look at your safety, your stretch, and your, I forget the third bucket, but you have your, what is it?
Dreams.
And ultimately, what I'd encourage all of you to look at is, shoot for those reach goals, those goals that you maybe have put on the back burner because you say, yeah, this doesn't fit into, X, Y, and Z bucket of funding, or, different grant or financial programs that you've considered in the past, related to clean energy, related to those things that Josh just referenced, greenhouse gas reductions, clean energy, anything under that umbrella. But shoot for those projects that, you haven't been able to get funded in the past, that you're really encouraged by, that you think could really make a difference and have an impact, particularly on those low income and disadvantaged communities that we've talked about, that 40%. So just wanted to throw that out there as a sort of culminating thought.